Helena never imagined how much life could change in a single night. At 25, she believed she was finally building something solid. She had a stable job at one of the city's top construction companies and, in secret, was involved in a hidden relationship with her boss, Marcos, a charismatic, seductive, and influential man. He always insisted they had to keep everything under wraps, that his position didn't allow for scandals, but he promised things would change soon, and Helena believed him. Maybe out of naivety, maybe because she wanted to believe, or maybe because deep down she needed to believe she wasn't giving her heart away in vain. Until that night. The ballroom was flawless. Tables adorned with lilies and white roses, rows of crystal glasses perfectly aligned, the gentle hum of a string quartet weaving through the air like an elegant whisper. The golden glow of the chandeliers reflected off long gowns and tailored suits. It was the kind of setting Helena had never felt she belonged in, but somehow that night she believed it might be different. She had been personally invited. Marcos had handed her the note himself, with that smile that always made her forget the risks. She took it as a sign. Her heart raced as she walked among the guests, repeating to herself that maybe, just maybe, this would be the moment he revealed everything. Perhaps finally, she would no longer be a secret. But when the speech began, the blow landed like a knife. Marcos raised his champagne glass, his eyes gleaming with pride, and introduced everyone to his official fiancée, Isadora, a wealthy socialite, daughter of a politically powerful and affluent family. The room erupted in applause and congratulations. "A marriage that will bring great business," someone said aloud. The clapping rang in Helena's ears like gunshots. Marcos smiled broadly, calculatedly. The same smile he had given her hours earlier in private, whispering that soon they wouldn't have to hide anymore. And now, in front of everyone, he chose someone else. The air vanished from her lungs. Her heart shrank inside her chest. In that moment, she realized she didn't exist. She was nothing more than a disposable piece in a game of interests, a secret he never intended to reveal. The guests around her had no idea, but Helena was certain her face gave everything away. She felt tears threaten to escape before she could even move. She ran. Her heels struck the marble floor, each step echoing like a public announcement of her shame. Her makeup smeared with her tears, and with every meter she crossed, her heart felt more crushed. By the time she reached the parking lot, her hands were shaking so badly she nearly dropped the keys. She got in the car without thinking, started the engine. She just needed to get away from everything. The city faded behind her in minutes, the lights shrinking in the rearview mirror like the world she once knew was vanishing. The night wore on, and the radio, still on by accident, played cheerful songs that felt like mockery. Helena cycled between sobs and long silences, her eyes burning, her mind replaying every memory, secret meetings, whispered promises, his laughter as he told her one day she'd be introduced as the woman of his life. Now, it all sounded like a cruel joke. Before she knew it, she was driving along a coastal road. The breeze carried the scent of the sea, mixed with the salt of her own tears. The wet asphalt reflected the dim light of scattered lampposts, and each curve made her feel like she was drifting further from herself. She stopped in a small, nearly forgotten town on the map. The cobblestone streets were deserted, lit only by old yellow street lamps. The silence was so deep, she could hear the ocean's waves crashing even from hundreds of meters away. In the window of a bakery, she spotted a handwritten sign, "House for rent," near the beach. The owner was an elderly fisherman, his face weathered by the sun and years of sea labor. He looked at her for a moment but didn't ask questions. He simply handed her the key in exchange for cash, as if he instinctively understood that some people don't want to be found. The house was simple, old wood, time-worn furniture, and walls that smelled of dampness. But from there she could clearly hear the waves crashing against the rocks. The contrast was brutal. Hours ago she'd been surrounded by luxury, crystal glasses, and empty promises. Now she was in a small room with a thin mattress and faded curtains, and for the first time in hours she took a deep breath, a breath that wasn't quite relief, but survival, as if whispering to herself, "I'm still here." In the days that followed, Helena shut herself off completely. The little seaside town felt like a place suspended in time, but even the ocean breeze couldn't ease the weight pressing on her chest. She spent hours walking along the damp shore, letting the wind tangle her loose hair, and the salt in the air blend with the bitter taste of her own tears. Sometimes she would sit by the sea, arms wrapped around her knees, and remain there until the sun vanished beneath the horizon, feeling as if life had lost all meaning. But the nights were even harder. Lying in the narrow bed of the rented house, she listened to the waves crashing against the rocks. In the darkness, her mind replayed the sparkle of chandeliers at the company's gala, the sound of Marcos's voice proudly announcing Isadora, as if she were some kind of personal triumph. The contrast crushed her. From luxury to loneliness, from whispered promises to unbearable silence. It was on one of those walks, days later, that fate crossed her path. The sky was heavy, closed in, as if nature itself mirrored the chaos inside her. Thick clouds gathered along the horizon, and the wind grew stronger by the minute. The sea roared violently, hurling waves against the rocks with thunderous force. Lost in her thoughts, Helena didn't notice how close she had wandered to the edge of the cliffs. The damp stone beneath her feet gave way. One misstep, and her body slipped dangerously toward the abyss. Her heart pounded, a scream stuck in her throat. For a moment she was certain there would be no return. But firm hands caught her by the waist. "Careful!" a deep voice called out behind her, strong and laced with urgency. Startled, Helena turned. Standing before her was a tall man with broad shoulders, his black hair wild in the wind. His deep brown eyes held an intensity that seemed to conceal entire oceans of secrets. He held her securely, but gently, as if afraid to hurt her. Then the storm broke open. Thick raindrops pelted their faces, and the wind whipped their clothes tight against their bodies. "It's dangerous to stay here," he shouted over the roar of the sea. Without waiting for a reply, he led her away from the cliffs, guiding her up a narrow path toward a white house perched on the bluff. It was old, its walls worn by time, but there was something welcoming about it, like a forgotten refuge at the edge of the world. Helena was breathless, her feet caked in mud, hair plastered to her face. She entered without thinking, simply following the quiet strength that radiated from this stranger. She had no idea that this moment would be the beginning of a story that would change her life forever. The sun rose timidly the next morning, casting golden reflections across the sea, still restless from the storm. Helena opened her eyes slowly, disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings. The white walls were weathered with time, the ceiling creaked in the wind, and the bed, though simple, was surprisingly comfortable. For a few moments, she didn't know where she was. Then the memories returned like waves crashing on shore. The storm, the slip, the strong hands that saved her, and the eyes of the mysterious man who had brought her here. Startled, she sat up quickly. She was wearing an oversized men's shirt that hung loosely on her frame. She looked around for her own clothes, but they were nowhere in sight. Her heart began to race. "You're awake." The deep voice echoed from the doorway. She turned quickly. He stood there, tall with a steady posture, his jaw shadowed by a few days' stubble. He held a steaming mug in his large hands. His gaze was deep but restrained, like someone studying every detail with care, without stepping too close. "Who are you?" Helena's voice trembled. "Where am I?" "My name is Raphael," he said, calm and measured. "You nearly fell off the cliffs yesterday. I brought you here. It was too dangerous to leave you out there in the storm." Helena instinctively pulled the fabric of the shirt tighter against her body. "Why am I wearing this?" Raphael took a deep breath before answering, his eyes never wavering. "Your clothes were soaked and covered in mud. I didn't want you to get sick overnight." The silence between them grew heavy, thick with distrust. Helena watched him as one might a potential threat. He, in turn, remained still, almost distant, as if fully aware that any wrong move could make her retreat further. "And my phone?" she asked softly. "On the table," he replied. "But it won't help much. There's no signal out here. This beach is pretty remote." "So we're isolated?" He nodded slowly. "Yes, the nearest signal is in the village, a few kilometers away." Helena curled into herself on the bed, torn between fear and a strange, quiet sense that, despite everything, she wasn't in immediate danger. Raphael didn't seem to have any ulterior motives. On the contrary, he kept his distance as if he understood exactly how fragile she felt. In the days that followed, their routine unfolded in silence and subtle gestures. Raphael kept his distance, yet cared for her in quiet, thoughtful ways. He prepared simple meals, grilled fresh fish, vegetables from the garden, homemade bread baked in an old oven that creaked every time it opened. He would leave the plates on the table and step back, as if afraid to cross invisible boundaries. Helena, still wary, spoke very little. She spent her mornings by the window, silently watching him from afar. He didn't seem bothered. In fact, he almost seemed to expect it. When he wasn't in the kitchen, Raphael spent hours in the small wooden workshop at the back of the house. The rhythmic sound of the saw and hammer filled the air, along with the scent of sawdust drifting into the yard. His movements were steady and precise, but there was a quiet sorrow in the way he worked, as if every plank he sanded was an attempt to restore something broken inside himself. Helena couldn't help the comparison. She thought of Marcos, always in a rush, speaking loudly, gesturing with arrogance. Marcos entered a room and demanded attention. Raphael, in contrast, seemed to disappear within himself, yet it was impossible to ignore him. His presence didn't command. It stirred in silence. For days she resisted her curiosity, but one afternoon, overcome by the stillness, she found herself approaching the workshop. The strong scent of freshly cut wood enveloped her, and the rhythmic sound of sanding felt almost hypnotic. "You built all this?" she asked, hesitant. Raphael looked up slowly. His gaze was intense, but not intrusive. "The house was already here," he said, pausing. "But the furniture, yes, I make it. It's the only thing that calms me." Helena stepped closer and sat on an unfinished chair, watching him in silence. She noticed his hands, large, calloused, yet careful, as if the wood were something alive, something to be respected. The contrast with Marcos struck her again. One lived through appearances, flaunting power. The other rebuilt himself quietly, piece by piece. There was a pause before she dared another question. "Do you have family?" He took a long time to answer. The silence stretched so far that Helena almost regretted asking. "No, not anymore." He didn't elaborate, offered no details, but the way he averted his eyes said more than any explanation could. The silence that followed hung heavy in the air, filled with everything left unspoken. On the third night, another storm lashed the coast. The lights flickered, dimmed, and then went out completely. The house plunged into darkness, lit only by the flashes of lightning slicing through the sky. Helena tried to sleep, but each rumble of thunder brought back vivid flashes of the gala, the clinking glasses, the muffled laughter, the haunting stares she could never forget. She tossed and turned until a sound from the room next door made her sit up. Muffled cries, fragmented words. "No, don't do this to me. I trusted you." Her heart raced. For a moment, she couldn't tell if it was real or just in her head. But when Raphael's voice grew clearer, instinct took over. She crossed the hallway with quick steps and pushed the door open. Raphael was thrashing in bed, his face drenched in sweat, his body tense as if fighting off invisible demons. A flash of lightning lit up the room, revealing the pain etched across his face. "Raphael," Helena called gently, placing a hand on his shoulder. He jolted awake, breathing hard, disoriented. When his eyes met hers, shame swept over his expression, and he looked away. "Sorry. I didn't mean to wake you," he muttered. Helena shook her head, firm yet kind. "You don't need to apologize. Everyone has nightmares." For a moment, neither of them spoke. He sat at the edge of the bed, his chest rising and falling in uneven rhythm. She stood beside him, offering nothing but her quiet presence. And in that stillness, Helena understood. He too carried ghosts. She wasn't the only one who was broken. The next morning, they sat at the table together for the first time. The kitchen smelled of fresh coffee, and steam rose slowly from the clay mug. Raphael had placed a loaf of warm, homemade bread on the table, along with thick slices of cheese still wrapped in paper. Helena hesitated. For days, she had rejected any attempt at closeness, eating alone in silence. But that morning, for reasons she couldn't explain, she accepted. She took a seat across from him. The silence between them, once heavy, now felt almost comfortable. There was still space, yes, but it no longer felt like a wall, more like neutral ground, a space quietly being built. Raphael took a sip of coffee, his gaze soft but observant. Helena tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear and summoned the courage to break the invisible barrier. "Yesterday you spoke about trust," she said, lifting her eyes. Her voice was hesitant but steady. "I know what that feels like too." He set his mug down, leaning slightly forward, arms resting on the table. "What happened to you?" he asked gently. No pressure in his tone, just an unspoken promise that she was free to answer or stay silent, and either would be okay. Helena drew a deep breath. Her hands trembled slightly, and she pressed her fingers against the porcelain cup for grounding. "I got involved with the wrong man." The room thickened with silence. Only the distant crashing of waves filled the spaces between her words. "He was my boss," she continued, her voice catching. "He always said that one day he'd make things official. I believed him. I wanted to believe, but in front of everyone, he exposed me, chose someone else, as if I had never even existed." As she spoke the words, the bitter taste of the memory rose in her throat. The images returned, vivid and sharp. The glowing ballroom, raised glasses, Marcos's beaming face announcing Isadora. Every detail still pulsed like an open wound. Raphael said nothing. He simply listened. His gaze steady, serious but gentle. There was no judgment in his eyes, no pity, only recognition, as if he truly understood the kind of pain she carried. "I know what that feels like," he said softly, his voice nearly a whisper, heavy with its own weight. "Trust, that's the deepest wound when it breaks." Helena felt her chest tighten. His words echoed inside her like the echo of her own truth. And for the first time since she ran, she didn't feel alone in her pain. A long pause lingered between them. Then Raphael slid a slice of still warm bread toward her, offering it like a quiet act of solidarity. Helena took it, her fingers brushing his for a brief second. Neither of them pulled away too quickly. The fleeting contact sent an unexpected shiver through her. She looked down, but the corner of her mouth betrayed something new, a seed of trust beginning to take root. Days melted into weeks. Time by the sea seemed to flow differently, slow, almost synchronized with the rhythm of the waves. Each sunset felt like a silent invitation to stay, as if the outside world had simply ceased to exist. Little by little, Helena adjusted to this new pace. She began waking early, walking along the cold sand that clung to her bare feet. Sometimes she'd find Raphael already in the garden, watering plants with slow, patient movements. At first, she only watched. Then, without either of them realizing it, they started sharing small tasks. Helena would gather herbs, he would chop vegetables. At night, they shared the silence of the porch, each with a mug of coffee in hand, while the ocean filled the space between their words. It wasn't a bond built on easy confessions. Raphael remained reserved. Even in the moments when his eyes softened, there was always a shadow behind them, as if he carried a weight too heavy to name. Helena noticed. And with each passing day, her curiosity grew, mingled with a quiet desire to cross that invisible line. There were small cracks in his armor. One afternoon, her unexpected laughter as she slipped in the sand drew a rare, fleeting smile from him, one that seemed almost forgotten. Another time, while picking tomatoes in the garden, their fingers brushed. Neither pulled away too quickly. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was charged with something unspoken, something neither dared acknowledge. Still, there were days Helena thought about leaving. One morning she even packed her bag, folding clothes with trembling hands. But as she bent down to slip on her shoes, she saw Raphael asleep on the porch, his head resting on his arm, exhausted from the workshop. That moment, him, vulnerable and unaware, was enough to make her stay. Tarisem sat as one morning, She decided to walk to the nearest village. She needed supplies, but also a breath of air beyond the walls of the White House. The road was long, a dirt path lined with low vegetation and bushes weathered by the salty wind. When she arrived, curious eyes followed her. Men sitting outside the bar paused their conversations to watch her pass. Children ran around laughing, only to be quickly called back by their mothers, as if her presence posed some danger. Inside the small grocery store, the air shifted the moment she walked in. The owner barely looked at her, rushing through the checkout like he couldn't wait for her to leave. And then, as she paid, she heard the hushed whispers behind her. "That's the woman staying at his house. Poor thing. She has no idea who he really is. They say he was responsible for a tragedy. That people died because of him." Helena froze. Her heart raced, cold sweat trickling down her spine. She wanted to turn around, to ask, to demand the truth, but fear held her back. She paid quickly and left, the weight of the shopping bag like lead in her hands. Outside, the morning wind sliced against her skin. The words echoed endlessly in her mind. Guilty, tragedy, lives lost. The walk back felt longer than before, each step dragged by a flood of questions she didn't want to ask. When she reached the house, Raphael was in the workshop. He was hammering a board, his face focused, serious. Each strike of the hammer echoed inside her like an accusation. Helena stood there for a moment, watching. Part of her wanted to confront him, to tear the truth out of him, but another part was too afraid of what she might hear. That night, tension hung thick in the air. They sat at the table as usual, but the atmosphere was heavy. The wind howled against the windows louder than ever, making the candle flames flicker. Helena's food sat untouched, growing cold on her plate. She couldn't bring herself to take a single bite. The weight of silence was unbearable. The whispers from the village echoed in her mind like a constant buzzing hum. At last she found the courage to speak. "Raphael." Her voice came out weaker than she wanted. "What do people say about you in the village?" He stopped chewing. His fork clattered against the plate with a sharp, final sound. Silence fell, thick, suffocating. His eyes slowly lifted to meet hers. "What did you hear?" His voice was deep, steady, but carried a warning, like he was bracing for a blow he'd taken before. Helena took a breath, trying to hold his gaze. "They say you were responsible for a tragedy, that people died because of you." The words echoed through the room like an accusation. Raphael leaned back in his chair. For a moment, Helena saw something flicker in his eyes, part pain, part anger, like someone had just touched an old open wound. "I knew you'd hear it eventually," he said, rubbing his hand across his face with a tired sigh. "But it's not that simple." Her heart pounded out of rhythm. "Then explain it to me." Raphael rose slowly and walked to the window. He stood there in silence for a few moments, staring out at the dark sea. His broad shoulders seemed to carry an invisible weight. "I was an engineer," he began, his voice low and strained, "in charge of major projects, buildings that reshaped the city skyline." He paused, and when he continued, each word felt like a weight he had to lift. One of them collapsed. He closed his eyes for a moment, and Helena could almost see the scene through the way he spoke. It was in the middle of the night. The concrete gave way. Families lost everything. Some lost their lives. Helena held her breath, feeling the gravity of his words settle in her chest. Raphael braced himself against the window frame, as if he needed it to stand. "They pinned it all on me. The paperwork had been forged, contracts falsified, witnesses bought off, and all of it pointed to me as if I had made every decision alone. I was the scapegoat." His voice faltered, but he regained composure and turned to face her. "I couldn't prove my innocence. I had no strength left. No one stood by me. Those who could have spoken up stayed silent. I lost my career, my name, everything. And that's how I ended up here." Helena swallowed hard. Her hands trembled in her lap. Part of her wanted to believe him, because every action he'd shown so far carried the quiet weight of truth. But another part remembered the voices in the village, the suspicious stares, the way even the children were pulled away at his presence. Rumors always held a seed of truth. "And you expect me to just believe you?" Her voice quivered, not out of doubt but fear. Raphael didn't answer right away. He took 2 slow steps toward her, his eyes glassy but steady. "No," he said at last. "I don't expect anything. I just needed you to know." Silence returned, but this time it wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, loaded with questions neither of them knew how to ask, and truths still waiting in the dark. That night, as Helena lay down, sleep wouldn't come. The sound of the waves felt louder, like the sea itself was shouting the same secrets he had just confessed. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Marcos's face, the boss who exposed her, then discarded her. Then came Raphael's gaze, lined with pain and remorse, and for the first time she realized maybe the 2 men weren't so different. Both carried secrets. Both had the power to hurt her. But the one difference, the one that mattered, was that unlike Marcos, Raphael never tried to hide his darkness. Then in the days that followed, their relationship grew unstable. Sometimes they walked side by side along the beach, wrapped in a silence that felt almost like complicity, letting the rhythm of the waves fill the space where words still wouldn't go. Other times they drifted apart, an invisible wall rising between them, a quiet reminder that there were still wounds unspoken, truths unrevealed, and yet their closeness seemed inevitable. Small gestures began to crack that wall. When Raphael would wait for her to return from the village, helping her carry the bags, when Helena would quietly leave a piece of fresh bread outside his workshop, still warm from the oven. These were quiet signals, almost imperceptible, but more honest than any declaration. One cold night, after hours without speaking a word, Helena stepped out onto the porch. The wind whipped through her hair, and the sea shimmered beneath the moonlight like a restless mirror. The air carried the scent of salt and wine. Raphael was already there, seated with his elbows resting on his knees, a nearly empty bottle beside him. His eyes were fixed on the horizon, carrying a weight that seemed too heavy to share. When he noticed her presence, he didn't flinch. He simply lifted his glass and, with a simple gesture, offered, "Want some?" Helena hesitated. Part of her was afraid to accept, as if doing so meant crossing a line that might be safer left intact. But in the end, she sat beside him and took the glass. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was alive, with everything that could be said, yet remained floating between them. For long minutes they just watched the sea, the crashing waves acting as a soundtrack for thoughts neither of them dared to voice. Until Raphael broke the silence, his voice low, almost like speaking to himself. "Do you still think I'm guilty?" Helena turned to him slowly, meeting his gaze. The moonlight caught the weariness on his face, but also the raw sincerity in his eyes. "I don't know what to think," she said softly but steadily. "All I know is, you don't seem like a man who could carry that kind of guilt." A brief, sad smile touched Raphael's lips. "Maybe that's exactly why I disappeared. Because truth doesn't matter, once everyone's already decided who you are." His words echoed inside her like an answer to her own pain. It was the same feeling she had when Marcos discarded her publicly. No voice, no defense, no one to believe her side. A chill ran down her spine, and not from the cold. Without meaning to, her hand brushed his on the armrest of the chair. The touch was soft, almost accidental. But he didn't pull away. He didn't have to say anything, because in that simple contact, there was more trust, more understanding than in any long conversation. For a few suspended seconds, time stood still. The porch, the moon, the sea, all faded to the background. There was only the 2 of them, sharing a silence that for the first time seemed to promise more than it hid. The fragile silence Helena and Raphael had built began to fracture the moment the outside world came knocking. On a grey morning, Helena decided to walk to the village alone. She needed air, needed to feel some sense of control over her life again, away from the White House that had begun to feel more like a refuge than a home. The cold air stung her cheeks, and the wind swept dried leaves down the dirt streets. As she crossed the small square, her heart stopped. Marcos was there, impeccably dressed in a light suit, as elegant as ever, chatting with the shopkeeper as if he belonged there. Just another villager. But he didn't. Everything about him, his gestures, his rehearsed laugh, the arrogant tilt of his head, screamed power and control. When he spotted her, he smiled wide, full of the same confidence that once enchanted her, and now made her sick. "Helena!" he called out, as if it were perfectly normal to see her there, as if he hadn't shattered her just weeks before. She froze. For a second, her legs refused to move. Curious eyes turned her way. A few people whispered behind cupped hands. Helena felt the weight of the moment, as if the entire square was witnessing the past she was trying so hard to bury. "What are you doing here?" Her voice came out firm, though trembling beneath the surface. Markos walked toward her with measured steps, completely unfazed by the tension. "I needed to talk to you. You vanished. No one knew where you were." Helena felt anger rise in her chest, mingling with the fear of being dragged back into that manipulative game. "You humiliated me in front of everyone," she said through clenched teeth. "There's nothing you can say." Markos sighed, slipping into that false tone of regret she knew all too well. "I made a mistake, yes, but you need to understand. What happened was business. Isadora is the daughter of one of our biggest investors. You really think I could throw all that away for us?" The memory of that night struck her like a blow. The raised glasses, the echo of applause, his face beaming as he introduced another woman. Helena wanted to scream, but instead, her voice came out cold and steady. "You used me." He stepped closer, lowering his voice to a whisper meant only for her. "Used you? Or did you let yourself get swept up because you knew that being with me meant more than with anyone else? Don't pretend you didn't feel the power we had." Helena took a step back, her heart racing. Part of her hated how for so long she had believed exactly that she was special for being chosen, even if only in secret. But now, that memory tasted bitter. "You don't know me anymore," she said, meeting his gaze with quiet defiance. Markos tilted his head, studying her like a rare object. "On the contrary, I know you better than anyone. That's why I'm here. Because I realized you're the only woman who ever really challenged me. I can't just walk away from you." Words that might once have shaken her now sounded like chains trying to bind her again. Helena took a deep breath, tightened her grip on the shopping bag, and turned her back on him. She walked quickly down the road back to Raphael's house, the wind lashing her face like it was trying to strip away any remaining doubt. But the unease lingered. She knew Markos wouldn't give up easily. That same afternoon, another shadow appeared. Raphael was working in the workshop when a black car pulled up in front of the house. The growl of its engine clashed with the stillness of the beach, and when Helena peeked through the window, a chill ran down her spine. A middle-aged man stepped out. His wrinkled suit, loosened tie, and cold, predatory stare gave him the air of a weary wolf, one who might have slowed with time, but not lost his bite. He walked slowly, deliberately, like someone who knew his presence alone could cause damage. "Augusto," Raphael said his name like poison, each syllable soaked in bitterness. "It's been a while, Raphael," the man replied, his tone laced with irony. "I see you've made yourself comfortable. Far from the world. Far from the hard questions." Helena stepped out onto the porch, tense, trying to piece together what was happening. "Who is he?" she asked, unable to hide her unease. Raphael hesitated for a moment, his jaw clenched before he answered. "My former partner." Augusto laughed, but it wasn't a laugh of amusement. It was sharp and scraping, like metal against stone. He turned his gaze directly on her and hissed, venom dripping from every word. "So, this is the new distraction. You do know, miss, that you're living with a man who killed entire families." Helena's blood ran cold. She instinctively took a step back, as if the accusation had physically struck her. Raphael stepped forward, his voice steady but his eyes blazing with restrained fury. "Shut your mouth, you know the truth. You're the one who signed those contracts, who bought cheap, faulty materials just to pad your pockets. I was just in the wrong place at the wrong time." Augusto raised his eyebrows mockingly. "And can you prove it?" he taunted, arms crossed. "Of course you can't, and if you try, you'll regret it." The silence that followed was suffocating. The wind beat against the house's windows, but neither man moved. Helena stood frozen, witnessing years of buried rage rise to the surface, thick and ready to ignite. Finally, Raphael spoke, his voice low, trembling with fury. "Leave, Augusto!" The man smirked, a slow, deliberate grin that felt more like a warning than a smile. He stepped back. "I won't be long, you'll see. You can't outrun the past." Then he got into the car and disappeared down the dirt road, a cloud of dust rising behind him in the heavy afternoon air. That night, neither Helena nor Raphael could sleep. The house felt smaller, the wind louder, every creak and whisper in the dark swelling into a looming threat. Helena paced the living room, her footsteps echoing across the wooden floor. "Why didn't you ever tell me everything?" she asked, voice thick with emotion. "They call you a murderer, and all you've given me are fragments. How do you expect me to believe you?" Raphael rose from the chair, his face etched with exhaustion, eyes brimming with unshed tears. "Because I don't want to drag you into this abyss with me," he said, his voice cracking. "I've already lost everything once. I can't lose you too." Helena's breath came fast, her chest rising and falling like she was fighting an invisible weight. "I'm already in the abyss, Raphael," she said, steady and clear. "From the moment I chose to trust you." He stepped closer, slowly, almost hesitantly, as if afraid she might pull away. When he finally reached her, his calloused hands cradled her face, his gaze locked on hers. "Helena, I never asked you to trust me," he murmured, voice low and raw. "But if you're still here, it's because deep down you already do." For a long moment they stood there, breathing the same breath, held in a silence heavy with unspoken truths. Then Helena closed her eyes and let the distance between them dissolve. The kiss came like a breaking dam, intense, trembling, filled with fear and longing, as if they both knew their time together might be short, threatened by the shadows closing in around them. The days that followed were thick with tension. Marcos began showing up in the village, spreading rumors like poison spilled into still water. He hinted that Helena had lost her way, that she was blinded by a dangerous man, entangled in something far too dark to be explained. His words spread like wildfire through dry grass. Augusto, meanwhile, haunted the beach. Sometimes his black car sat parked outside the house for long stretches. He never got out, just watched. Other times, anonymous notes appeared at the door, brief, cryptic threats that turned the air heavy with dread. The fragile bubble Helena and Raphael had built now felt like it was about to burst. Helena felt it in every step she took through the village, the whispers behind her back, the pitying looks, or worse, the cold disdain, as if she had chosen the wrong side. As if she were complicit in something monstrous. But deep down, it wasn't their judgment that tormented her. It was the doubt still gnawing at her soul. Was Raphael truly innocent? Or was she trapped beside a man too broken or too guilty to ever admit the truth? That night the rain poured without mercy. The wind slammed against the windows as if trying to force its way into the house. Helena tossed and turned in bed, heart racing until the restlessness became unbearable. She got up and walked down the hallway toward the workshop. The door was slightly ajar. Inside, Raphael sat at the table. Papers were scattered everywhere. Blueprints, building permits, contract copies, reports marked with handwritten notes. The lamplight cast heavy shadows across his face, making him look older, more worn. Helena stood in the doorway, her breath shallow. "What is all this?" she asked, voice trembling, as if afraid of the answer. Raphael looked up. His eyes held exhaustion, but also something she hadn't seen before: resolve. "Evidence," he said firmly. "Things I've kept for years, hoping one day I'd have the courage to use them." He pushed the papers toward her. "This is the truth, Helena. Augusto tampered with materials, stole funds, signed documents under my name. I found out too late. By the time the building collapsed, there was nothing I could do." Helena stepped forward slowly, her hands shaking. She picked up the papers and let her eyes scan each line. The forged signatures were there, the altered reports. and suddenly the version she'd heard in the village began to lose its weight. For a moment she inhaled deeply, as if a massive burden had lifted from her chest. "Why didn't you bring this to light before?" she asked, barely above a whisper. Raphael dropped his gaze. "Because I was alone," he said, his voice cracking. No one wanted to listen. Everyone had already decided I was guilty. Helena stood in silence, clutching the papers like they were the only anchor left between her and the chaos. Part of her believed him, perhaps because she had always believed, from the very first glance. But another part still hesitated, afraid of being deceived again. Then a thunderclap split the sky, shaking the house, and with it came a harsh, brutal sound, heavy knocks pounding on the front door. Helena and Raphael locked eyes, both tense as if fate had finally come to collect its debt. Raphael stood up abruptly. The sound of the chair scraping against the wooden floor echoed like thunder through the room. He flung the door open, and there was Augusto, soaked from the rain, hair plastered to his forehead, wearing that same venomous smile that seemed to feed off other people's misery. "So you've decided to unveil your little treasure," he sneered, eyes narrowing at the papers on the table. "Don't be stupid, Raphael. This won't save you. It'll only make things worse." Helena stared at the man, her heart racing, palms sweating as she gripped the documents in her hands. "You ruined his life," she said, voice firm despite the fear. Augusto let out a dry laugh. "His life?" he scoffed. "He was never more than a pawn. And you, darling, you're just another distraction." Raphael took a step forward, fist clenched, his entire body tense as if 1 second away from exploding. "Get out of my house, now." "Or what?" Augusto challenged, his smirk taunting. "Gonna hit me? Prove to everyone you're violent too, not just a criminal." The air turned heavy. Helena could feel the storm's electricity in the room, as if the entire world was holding its breath. Then another voice rang from the doorway. "That's enough." Helena turned, and the ground disappeared beneath her. Marcos. Standing in the doorway, his dark suit soaked through, rain dripping from his hair, eyes sharp and cold as blades. "Helena, we're leaving. Now." It wasn't a request. It was an order. "You don't belong here. Not with him." She stepped back, heart pounding. "You don't have the right to tell me where I belong." Marcos laughed, a joyless, hollow sound. "Of course I do. You think you can start over with a broken man, ruined, hiding on some beach? You deserve more. With me, you'll have everything you ever dreamed of." Tears stung Helena's eyes. "Everything and except respect. You exposed me, threw me away like I was nothing." Marcos extended a hand, filled with arrogant confidence. "And still you feel something for me. I know you do." Before she could answer, Raphael stepped in front of her, blocking Marcos from view, shoulders squared, his gaze hard. "She's not going anywhere with you." The silence that followed was suffocating. Inside, Raphael was facing a ghost from his past. Outside, Augusto watched like a predator, ready to pounce on any weakness. And in the middle of it all, Helena trembled, knowing her whole life had led to this moment. She looked at the papers in her hands, the proof of Raphael's truth. She looked at Marcos, remembering the public humiliation, the fake smiles at that gala dinner. And then she looked at Raphael, the man who'd saved her from the cliffs, who bore his scars openly and never tried to lie about them. Her voice broke the silence. "Enough." Everyone turned to her. Helena raised the papers like a weapon. "This is the truth. Raphael is not guilty, and I won't let you keep treating him like a criminal." Augusto stepped forward, eyes blazing. "You have no idea what you're doing." "I do." Helena's voice was strong now. "I'm choosing to believe him." Marcos laughed, incredulous, rain streaking down his face. "So that's it? You're throwing your life away for this man?" Helena took a deep breath, hands steady even as her heart raced. "My life was thrown away the moment I trusted you. Now, it's different." The silence that followed was a contained explosion. Augusto squinted, hatred in his eyes, and stepped back, defeated by a woman who refused to be silenced. "This won't end well," he warned before disappearing into the storm. Marcos made one last attempt, hand still outstretched, voice dripping with fake sweetness, but the look in Helena's eyes stopped him. There was a resolve there he had never seen before, and for the first time, Marcos understood he had no power over her anymore. When the door finally closed, only the sound of rain remained. Helena's legs buckled, her body trembling. Raphael caught her before she collapsed. "You didn't have to do that," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. She looked up at him, tears streaming down her face, but not a hint of regret. "I did, because for the first time, I chose for myself." And she embraced him, like someone who had finally found home. In the days following the confrontation, the silence in the White House felt deeper than ever. The storm had passed, but its echo still lingered in the hallways, in the exchanged glances, in the words left unspoken. Every morning, Helena walked along the porch, watching the sea in its calm forged after chaos. With each wave crashing against the rocks, she felt that same serenity beginning to bloom within her. It was as if, for the first time in a long while, she could breathe without fear. Raphael spent hours in the workshop, but something had changed. If before he worked as a way to flee his thoughts, now each strike of the hammer seemed to bring release. He was no longer a man bowed under the shame of an imposed past, but someone who dared to lift his eyes again. One clear morning, days later, Helena woke to the smell of fresh bread and coffee. She found Raphael in the kitchen, setting the table. His face was lit by a rare, almost forgotten smile. "Today is a different day," he said, handing her a cup. "Why?" she asked, curious. He looked into her eyes, and there was something new in his gaze. Resolve. "Because I've decided I won't live in hiding anymore." Helena's heart skipped. Raphael opened a drawer and pulled out a thick envelope, yellowed with time. "These are all the proofs, the forged contracts, the emails, the receipts. It's time to take them to the authorities." She stood, moved. "Are you sure? This could bring more trouble." "It could bring my freedom," he replied, tired but confident. "And all I want is a life where I no longer have to hide." In the village, the news spread quickly. Raphael had handed over the documents, and an investigation was opened against Augusto and the other partners. This time, when people looked at him, it wasn't only with suspicion, there was curiosity now, even respect. Helena walked beside him down the cobblestone streets, head held high, no longer the humiliated woman who had fled the city. She had become someone who had learned to rise, even when everyone expected her to stay down. A few weeks later, Marcos tried to reach her again. He sent letters, messages, and even appeared one last time on the beach. But Helena didn't flinch. "You're part of a closed chapter," she said, firm. "Don't come looking for me again." Marcos watched her in silence, realizing the woman before him was no longer the one who had once accepted his crumbs in secret. And he left, defeated, disappearing from her life for good. Time passed, and the White House slowly became a true home. Helena helped paint the walls, her hands stained with paint, laughter slipping out when she made a mistake. Raphael built furniture for each room, and every piece carried something of him: strength, care, permanence. At night they laughed over small arguments about colors and finishes, and without realizing it, they were building more than a house. They were building a future. One golden afternoon, as the sun dipped behind the sea, Raphael called Helena to the porch. The wind danced through her hair, and the light in her eyes gleamed even brighter. He held her hand tightly, though his heart beat fast. "Helena, I spent years believing I deserved nothing but silence, that I had no right to start over." He paused, voice trembling. "But you changed everything. You showed me I can still believe in someone." With shaking knees, he knelt before her and pulled a small wooden box from his pocket. Inside, a simple ring, one he had made himself in the workshop. "I don't have much to offer, but I have what matters, my truth, my life. Will you share it with me?" Helena's eyes welled up. She took a deep breath, and for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid of what might come, only certain. "Yes, Raphael, I will." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and she embraced him tightly, as if finally she had found a safe place for her heart. That night, sitting together on the porch, they watched the horizon. The sea, once a witness to their fears and secrets, now seemed to sing a song of hope. Helena rested her head on his shoulder and whispered, "You're not the broken man they say you are. You're the man who saved me." Twice. Raphael wrapped his arm around her, closing his eyes. And there, between the sound of waves and the scent of salty wind, two hearts scarred by the past finally found their new beginning.